Hello, everyone. Welcome back to 305 Insights. Today's episode is the start of what I'm going to call summer football buildup, summer football extravaganza. I don't know. Basically, we're going to be focusing on college football for the next few episodes. We'll throw in some recordings with Miguel and Eric, but we're really building up. Week zero feels like it's just around the corner for college football. And I think, as we all can tell, based off of the amount of episodes on this podcast dedicated to college football, that's one of the biggest passions here. So, figured I'd start off with what I believe are the biggest games in the 2024 college football season. Now, what makes this list in terms of these games the biggest? It's not necessarily the matchups of Georgia, Texas, or Ohio State, and Michigan. You know, those things happen now. Especially the Michigan, Ohio State. The Georgia, Texas is a new thing with the SEC, um, taking in Oklahoma and Texas this season. So it's more about the intrigue in the matchups. Some of them have huge stakes. Other ones are just storyline purposes. It may not really matter at the end of the season, but there's just a lot of compelling things that are going on. The subplots is what we'll be looking at with some of these games. So, that being said, setting the tone for that, we start off with the first game. Week one, neutral site, quote unquote, Las Vegas, Nevada. It is USC versus LSU. Now, to me, this is one of the most intriguing games, and it's in week one, but it's crazy to say, but I believe both of these teams are at a crossroad with their coaches. Again, I preface it by saying I know it sounds crazy, but let's just take a deep dive for a second. Brian Kelly leaves Notre Dame. He believes to greener pastures at LSU. He believes, or he believed at Notre Dame that there is a ceiling with talent that you could get in terms of the recruits need to be accepted at the academics and whatnot. It kind of limits their talent pool a little more than other programs outside maybe Stanford. You go to LSU, LSU recruits itself. Louisiana is a talent rich state, close proximity to the Houston metropolitan area, and there's a lot of LSU transplants there, college transplants, once they finish graduating. And so it gives you a leg in Texas. And don't get me wrong, this is his third season, his first two seasons, 10-4, 10-3. It's a 20-7 record. You won the SEC, it's West, right? Well, they beat out Alabama and all those guys in his first year. They lose to Georgia. They lose in their bowl game, I believe, and then last year, they go 10-3. But this is the true test for Brian Kelly this year, because again, you left Notre Dame for greener pastures. What nobody anticipated was the explosion of NIL, because again, LSU could recruit itself. Now you have the competition of other schools with a certain amount of resources needed to convince recruits to go to them. You lose Jaden Daniels, the Heisman winner. You lose Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors, your two top wide receivers. All three of them went in the first round of the NFL draft. You're replacing your offensive coordinator. You're replacing your defensive coordinator. And there's not a lot of depth at the defensive tackle position, which is surprising for a team of LSU's caliber. But there was a interview that sort of went viral on social media with Brian Kelly saying along the lines of, we want people who want to be here. We don't want people who are collecting a paycheck. And listen, I get what type of culture you're trying to build at LSU. But unfortunately, in today's landscape of NIL, there's a reason why these kids are in the transfer portal. Let's say, for example, Jared Verse. He was at the University of Albany, and then he went to FSU. He went there for development, of course, yes. But I'm sure NIL payments helped out. You know, there are Caleb Downs went from Alabama, the best team in the country. A lot of people think over the past, well, not last year, but over the past decade plus since Nick Saban's been there, the premier program in college football. Nick Saban leaves. He enters the transfer portal. Ohio State and its boosters say, Caleb, come play with us. And by the way, here's a nice check that you can enjoy. Let's not kid ourselves, folks. There's a lot of kids out there who, once they make it on that, lower tier D1 level, D2 level, and they find a way to move up in life, and by this saying moving up to different Power Four schools, they're going to take that money. That's just the way it is now. And to be that coach that says, we don't want that, we don't need that, listen, I'm not saying overpay for players, but you got to read the room. And that's not always going to fly with everyone. So, year three is usually the year where you see the culture and the fruits of your labor and recruiting and all that stuff back in the day, even back as a few years ago. But now, again, with NIL, it's different. How does he recover with losing all this talent? Are they still going to have one of the worst defenses in college football? Are they going to complement that horrible defense with a good offense again? LSU doesn't have an easy schedule. This first game is basically going to set the tone for how they're going to play this season. Then we switch over to USC. Lincoln Riley, year three as well. Let's be real. You wasted the first 2 years at USC when you had a quote unquote generational quarterback, whether I believe that or not. A lot of people believe that. Generational quarterback in Caleb Williams because you held on to your defensive quarter, Alex Greenwich, for too long. You wasted your offensive capabilities with a horrible defense. They hired D'Antoni Lynn away from UCLA, who also spent time with the Baltimore Ravens. And it appears the Baltimore Ravens just produce high-level defensive coordinators for other NFL teams and college football teams like crazy. Will that be enough? Will they be able to mold the kids that they already have on the roster? Will the scheme make a huge difference? And again, outside of this game, the transition to the Big Ten makes the outlook even tougher for USC. Think about it. In the Pac 12, you really had how many teams you had to worry about if you're USC and you're hitting on all cylinders? Oregon, Utah, Washington. You can handle UCLA. You can handle Washington State. You can handle Colorado, Oregon State, Stanford, Cal. Come on. Now you're adding those types of teams outside of Utah. You're adding Oregon, Washington, UCLA. You can handle them, like I said, but still, they're going to the Big Ten. Now you got to go up against the likes of maybe not on a yearly basis, but you're still going up against Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Iowa. I know some of these Penn State, some of these teams aren't, the flashy team or whatever, but if you have a soft defense, Big Ten's going to run all over you. It's generic, but they play that smash mouth type of football. Even Illinois under Brett Bielema, they're just going to run it down your throat if you can't stop them. This is an important game for these two teams to establish where they're going to go this season under new coordinators. Can these I mean, Lincoln Riley's a brilliant offensive minded head coach. Brian Kelly has proven time and time again that he is a winner. But where does Brian Kelly fit in the new age of college football? Where does Lincoln Riley fit? Where does he fit in this transition to the Big Ten? Can he lean on just having the best offenses all the time? We'll see. Another game I'm really looking forward to, September 7th, Texas at Michigan. Michigan has the longest winning streak in the nation, and Texas, let's not say they're officially back, but they have national championship aspirations. They're firing on all cylinders. The recruiting's hitting, the transfer portal's doing well, the development's going great. Steve Sarkisian has really got this machine. It's well oiled right now. It's it's pretty impressive. You got Quinn Ewers coming back for another year because he's going to take advantage of that weak 2025 QB draft class. You got Arch Manning backing him up. You got Isaiah Bond from the transfer portal. You've got a lot of talent on offense coming back. They're going to have one of the best O lines in the country. But with the beef that they lost up front in Byron Murphy and Sweat, are they going to be able to control the run games? Are they going to be able to play that physical nature of football? Because Michigan's going to test that. I know they lost Jim Harbaugh, but they've got a guy in Moore that he's proven he can win. I mean, small sample size, but he went up against Ohio State and they won. Ohio State's one of the most talented teams in the country last year, and they beat him under him. Can they build off the momentum of a national championship, beating Ohio State 3 years in a row? Their recruiting's been really great, has been like top tier, but the most important thing is their development has been amazing. Their recruiting has been solid, but their development has been off the charts. Can they continue to do that? You got to replace Blake Corum, um, JJ McCarthy. There's a lot of people on the defensive side you had to replace. Can they do it? Again, you figure they're still going to have that smash mouth physical type of football. Can Texas withstand that? It's very, very intriguing, folks. And these are early tests in the season. And another subplot in this, it's the second of the four Big Ten versus SEC matchups. Again, we talked about USC versus LSU, and we're talking about Texas, Michigan. There's Bama versus Wisconsin, and LSU's got another game against UCLA. This is the battle of perception. These are the two premier conferences we've talked about in previous podcasts. The new college football playoff was built for the SEC and the Big Ten. They have all these powerhouse schools. You know, in the Big Ten, you've got Penn State, you've got Michigan, you've got USC, you've got Ohio State, you've got Oregon, you've got Washington. You know, then you've got the lower rung schools like Wisconsin, not lower rung, but they could pop up every once in a while. But Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan State, you know, there's a little depth to that conference now that you added some of those Pac-12 powerhouses. The SEC, you add Texas and Oklahoma to a conference that already has Alabama, LSU, Georgia. You could say LSU. Ole Miss is going all in this year. Missouri, maybe. So, and then you got the lower rung school. Well, you know, you could throw maybe Tennessee in there if everything hits right, but they haven't been as consistent. You probably put Tennessee on a little lower. And then you got the teams like Kentucky. You've got Texas A&M. But anyways, you see the depth of these conferences compared to the Big 12 or the ACC, where there's a few teams here and there. But again, it's the perception that these are the two big conferences, the super conferences, basically, and everybody else. There's the haves which they are, and then there's the have-nots. There's a reason why Clemson and FSU are suing the ACC to try and get out. They're trying to join one of these two big conferences, and perception is going to be reality. If USC and Michigan beat Texas and LSU, Big Ten's going to have the bragging rights for a long time. If Texas beats Michigan, if LSU beats USC, I mean Texas beating Michigan, you're beating the defending national champions. You're beating the defending Big Ten champions. That's a definitive statement. LSU's reminding everybody that they're still there. They're still, a top tier program, and USC's just not ready for the big time yet. A lot of subplots, folks. Moving on to the third game, Georgia at Alabama. Now, I know, again, this is obviously a big game whenever they face off, whether it's in the SEC championship or in the regular season, because these are two of the premier programs. Ever since Kirby Smart took over Georgia, and of course, Nick Saban's been at Alabama. But again, we're talking about the subplots, the storylines, folks. Nick Saban is no longer there. Kalen DeBoer taken away from Washington. Can he keep the ball rolling with Alabama? Easier said than done. You're following one of, if not the greatest college football coach of all time. There is an immense amount of pressure on this new football coach at Alabama. 10-3 ain't going to cut it. You thought, I said LSU was at a crossroads with Brian Kelly. Imagine going 10-3 at Alabama in your first year and it being considered a failure. That's the type of pressure that he has. They need to be competitive in this game. They need to show. And again, it's at Bryant-Denny. Defend your home turf. You let Texas come in and dominate you last year. And again, that was the Nick Saban-led team. Now you got another team in Georgia. They're looking for revenge. They thought they were one of the best teams in the country last year. And you could have made the argument that they were. They just lost last. They lost later than anybody else did. They lost Alabama in the SEC championship game. That was their only loss. Georgia under Kirby Smart is shaping up to be the new Alabama, the premier football program. They won back-to-back national championships. They were on their way to a three-peat if it wasn't for that game against Alabama. It's no longer the master versus the apprentice. Kirby Smart has graduated to being the master. Can he put that final stamp of saying, we are the best? Everybody, I don't want to say everybody, but the national media perceives the SEC to be the premier conference. Georgia is the premier team. This is the start of a new era in the SEC. You no longer have the boogeyman of Nick Saban. And Georgia can really put that stamp in saying, we are the new boogeyman. Number 4, Clemson at FSU. Doak Campbell Stadium is going to be rocking for this game. This is the only game on the list that doesn't involve the SEC or Big Ten. Why is this game so intriguing? The ACC is only going to have, in all likelihood, maybe one team make the college football playoff, even though there's 12 slots. If this game's close, maybe you can get 2. And the loser that goes undefeated the rest of the season, they have that one loss, maybe they can get 2 people in. These are the best teams in the ACC. But is this the year Clemson fully falls off? And when I say fully, I mean just like 8-5 or 8-4, 7-5, because Dabo does not believe in the transfer portal. And we were talking about the lack of defensive tackle depth at LSU. Is Dabo willing to evolve in the new college football landscape? When is that going to catch up with him and this team? You don't have those brilliant coordinators anymore. You don't have Brent Venables running that defense. You don't have, a who's who of Jeff Scott and Tony Elliott and there's the guy who left for SMU a long time ago, Chad Morris. You had a run of really good coordinator hires. Now you've got Garrett Riley, Lincoln Riley's, relative Lincoln Riley, who was at TCU, and then try to come in last year and say, hey, listen, DJ Ungulale was the problem. We have Cade Klubnik. We have a new offensive coordinator that isn't some guy who was coaching in high school and was a GA assistant for a bunch of years. He went outside the box, didn't really work. Maybe it wasn't DJ. Maybe it's something else within the system that they have there. There's still talent there. There's still recruits that are willing to go there. But again, once the wheels fall off, how is Clemson going to recover? Is this the year that they fall off? Can Norvell keep the momentum going after a 10-win season 2 years ago and a 13-win undefeated season? And the pain and suffering of missing out on the college football playoffs as the first Power 5 undefeated school for that to happen to. Asterisks, I know that happened to Auburn all those years ago. But when you have a 4-team playoff, it's unfortunate when in that year you had, I believe this was 3 undefeated teams in that season where Auburn went 13-0. FSU was behind 2 one-loss teams. That's the difference. Whoever wins this game is in all likelihood the ACC champs. And they're going to be the representative in the college football playoffs. That's why this game is so important. These are, again, the top tier teams in the ACC. FSU needs to prove that they're all the way back. You don't have Jordan Travis. You don't have Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk. You don't have Trey Benson. You're not recruiting the high school rankings as well as a lot of people expect you to in terms of that top-end talent that you keep on missing out on, flipping on signing day. Can you really depend on the transfer portal on a consistent basis? We'll see. They got some high-end talent there. Can they keep the ball rolling? My final game number 5. And I personally think this is going to be the game of the year. Ohio State at Oregon. Ohio State got a lot of high-end talent in the transfer portal. Caleb Downs, Junkins, the running back from Ole Miss. You got Will Howard. You bring in another elite recruiting class led by Jeremiah Smith, a wide receiver, who in all likelihood is going to play as a true freshman. You return a lot of talent from a team that only lost to the defending champions during the regular season. We don't count that bowl game because you had a lot of talent missing there. It's kind of hard to count bowl games nowadays because, and again, I don't blame these kids for doing it, but a lot of kids declare for the draft and they just watch from the comforts of the bench or home. The winner of this game, barring major injuries, they're basically stamping their ticket to the college football playoff. And again, Oregon's joining the Big 12. Dan Lanning is the perfect coach for this team to lead them into the Big 12. The physical form of football matches up well with the Big 10. They're going to be one of the most talented teams in the Big 10. They're one of the most talented teams in the country. But Ohio State is probably the most talented team in the country. They're top 3, and they may not be 3 or 2. Can the Ducks make a statement in their first year? Can the Buckeyes remind everyone that they are regarded as one of the elites for a reason? A victory would quiet down the critics of Ryan Day and his big game results, probably only for a few weeks, but at least for this week, he can revel in that love and admiration. There's a lot of intriguing matchups this season, folks, especially with the new Big Ten and the new SEC, the new Big 12. How's Colorado going to do in there? I know there's some people that are excited. There's some people that are tired of a team that went 4-8 last year with another bunch of recruits coming in and transferring out. How's Utah going to manage in the new conference that they're in? Is UCF going to be improved? There's a lot of positivity coming out of UCF in Orlando with Gus Malzahn and how he's recruiting in the transfer portal, as well as actual high school recruiting. What's going to happen in the ACC with SMU and Cal and Stanford? How's Miami going to live up to off-season championship expectations as they always have with that fan base? Coming up, speaking of those conferences, we'll be previewing all of them and what to expect from each team. That's going to be continuing our college football build-up over the summer, folks. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on all the forms of social media or, let's just go back to the basics. Subscribe, YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify. You'll find us all there. Looking to pump out more content. Again, a lot of college football on the horizon for me. We're going to have some Panther talk. I'm going to try and convince Miguel to really talk about them. We've been a really big fan of them for over a decade now, season ticket holders. So we'll dive into that hopefully and get some recordings with Eric going, the three of us, the three amigos. So thanks for listening, folks. We'll see you next time on 305 Insights.